There is a burden that is unseen, yet it crushes the soul. An invisible weight, forged not in metal, but in fear. It manifests in the simplest gesture, in the clenching of the hand, in the refusal to share. It is avarice, the shadow that lengthens over the spirit, transforming prudence into prison, security into solitude. It is not the possession that corrupts, but the attachment devoted to it, a blind devotion that confuses value with accumulation, wealth with scarcity. Observe closely, for that which is guarded too fiercely is often what is lost first. What is hidden behind the locked door, the sealed safe, the barricaded soul? It is not abundance, but fear. The fear of lack, the fear of loss, the fear of tomorrow. And in this fear, life shrinks, the heart hardens, and what was meant to be a means becomes an end in itself, a god of metal and paper, secretly worshipped, but demanding visible sacrifices. Joy, compassion, and humanity itself. In the beginning, the seed of avarice can be confused with prudence. The wisdom of saving for times of scarcity, of foreseeing the coming winter. It is a primal instinct, the search for security, the protection against the uncertain. But where does prudence end and the sickness of the soul begin? Where does the line blur, and care transform into obsession? It begins as a whisper, a voice that promises control. Save more, it says. Do not trust tomorrow, do not trust others. Only what is in your hands is truly yours. The promise of this control, and the distrust in the future and in God, points to the foolishness of trusting solely in material possessions. So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. And so, the impulse to hoard intensifies, no longer out of necessity, but out of a deep distrust, an inability to rely on providence, on the generosity of others, or even on one's own capacity to start over. The accumulation becomes a shield, a barrier against a world perceived as hostile and unpredictable. What is accumulated is not just wealth, but also fear. Every coin saved, every possession held back, is one more brick in the wall the avaricious man builds around himself. A wall that, paradoxically, does not protect him, but imprisons him. The image of wealth as a trap that imprisons the individual in sin is recurrent in the scriptures. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. A wall that, paradoxically, does not protect him, but imprisons him. He becomes the jailer of his own soul, guarding a treasure that brings him no joy, only the constant anxiety of losing it. What was meant to be a source of security becomes the very source of his anguish. Material attachment, when excessive, is not a bond that unites, but a chain that imprisons. What should serve as a tool for life, as a means to a greater purpose, is inverted and begins to govern. The man no longer possesses the goods. It is the goods that possess him, dictating his steps, his thoughts, his fears. The heart, once open to the vast possibilities of the world, shrinks, becoming an armored vault, impenetrable to generosity, compassion, and love. The prison of attachment has no visible bars, but its walls are made of anxiety and deprivation. The avaricious person, even amidst abundance, lives in scarcity. He deprives himself of the pleasure of using what he has, of the comfort he could enjoy, of the joy of sharing. Every expense is a pain, every donation, an amputation. He becomes a zealous guardian of a treasure that does not enrich him but impoverishes him in spirit. Life becomes a constant counting, adding, and subtracting, where the final balance is always solitude. The closed heart does not just impede the exit, but also the entrance. How can grace, joy, and true wealth penetrate a spirit so barricaded? The soul, suffocated by the weight of what it holds back, loses its capacity to breathe, to expand, to feel. What was meant to be a refuge, becomes a dungeon, where the only sound is the rattling of the chains that the avaricious person himself forged. And thus, what was meant to serve, begins to govern. And man becomes a slave to his own possessions. Sacred art, in its millennial wisdom, has always warned us about the duality of wealth. It is not in itself, good or evil. It is an instrument, an energy, a potential. Like the golden light that emanates from the sun. It can nourish life or scorch the earth. The vault, a symbol of security and keeping, can shelter treasures that sustain communities or secrets that corrode the soul. Coins with their seductive shine represent the power of exchange, the capacity to transform the world. But when the golden light that illuminates them becomes a shadow that hides them, when the shine converts into darkness, it is because possession has been distorted. Wealth, which should be a flow, a river that irrigates the land, stagnates, becoming a swamp of selfishness and isolation. The history of humanity is filled with examples of this distortion. From kings who accumulated empires and died in solitude, to merchants who hoarded gold and lost their very souls. Wealth, in its essence, is a reflection of divine abundance, but when man imprisons it, when he makes it an end in itself, he not only corrupts it, but also corrupts himself, losing the capacity to see the true light, the true wealth that resides in sharing and communion. Amidst the darkness of avarice, the voice of the saints resonates like a lighthouse, illuminating the path of truth. Saint Basil the Great, one of the pillars of the Church in his wisdom, warns us with words that echo through the centuries, as relevant today as in his time. To whom do you do wrong, O rich man? Whom do you defraud? Is it not the poor whom you deprive of what is theirs? The bread you store up belongs to the hungry, the cloak you withhold, to the naked. The shoe that rots in your closet, to the barefoot, the money you bury, to the needy. You are a thief, for you hold back what does not belong to you. Saint Basil's clarity is cutting. He does not condemn wealth itself, but the selfish retention, the appropriation of what, by divine right, belongs to the community. The superfluous of one that, which exceeds their basic and legitimate needs, is the life of another. It is the food that satisfies hunger, the clothing that protects against the cold, the medicine that cures illness. And Saint John Chrysostom, the golden mouth, echoes this truth with equal fervor. He reminds us that true wealth is not in what we possess, but in what we are capable of giving. It is not the rich man who is avaricious, but the one who, having, does not give. It is not the poor man who is generous, but the one who, even lacking, shares the little he possesses. The measure of generosity is not the quantity of what is given, but the disposition of the heart that offers it. The message is unequivocal. Avarice is not just a sin against oneself, but a sin against one's neighbor, against justice, against the divine order itself. It is the refusal to recognize the interconnectedness of all creation, the denial of human fraternity. What is hoarded excessively, what is retained out of fear, is in reality a theft, a deprivation of the life and dignity of another human being. And in this deprivation, the avaricious person not only impoverishes the world, but impoverishes himself, losing the capacity to feel the true abundance that resides in sharing. The spiritual price of avarice is devastating, and its scars are deep and lasting. The soul of the avaricious person, once a fertile garden, transforms into an arid desert where life withers and hope fades away. The first sign of this desertification is the hardening of the heart. The heart, which should be a pulsating organ of love and compassion, turns into stone, insensitive to the pains of others, indifferent to the cries of the needy. Empathy atrophies, replaced by a cold and selfish calculation. The suffering of another is not seen as an invitation to help, but as a reminder of one's own vulnerability, a risk to the treasure guarded with such zeal. And so, compassion, the noblest of human virtues, is sacrificed on the altar of accumulation. The loss of compassion is merely the prelude to solitude. The avaricious person hoards gold and loses the other. He isolates himself in his fortress of possessions, pushing away friends, family, and anyone who might pose a threat to his treasure. Human relationships, which should be sources of joy and support, are viewed with distrust, as potential drains on his wealth. And so, he becomes a castaway in a sea of possessions, surrounded by everything, yet deprived of everything that truly matters: the warmth of an embrace, the sincerity of a glance, the sharing of a life. And in the end, he finds himself alone with his treasure, a king in an empty castle, surrounded by riches that cannot buy peace, joy, or the salvation of his soul. The weight of the possessions, which he struggled so hard to keep, becomes the weight of his own condemnation. But even in the most hardened heart, a silent call can resonate. To let go, to release, not out of obligation, but from a profound recognition that true wealth resides in the capacity to give, and to receive. Generosity is not a loss, but a multiplication and echo that returns in unexpected blessings. The soul's breath, suffocated by the weight of accumulation, is restored in the act of releasing. Every gesture of sharing, however small, is a sliver of light that penetrates the darkness. It is the rediscovery of true abundance, which is not measured in coins. For it is in detachment that we find true freedom, and in generosity, true wealth. May the shadow of avarice dissipate, and the light of compassion illuminate our paths. And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. As it is written, "They have freely scattered their gifts to the poor, their righteousness endures forever."